Let me ask you something simple before we begin. Have you ever watched someone bet everything on one hand and wondered whether they were a genius or just reckless? Because that's exactly what's happening right now with the American economy. And by the end of this, I think you'll see it too. Let's start with what's actually happening, in plain English. Since early 2025, the Trump administration has been building walls, not just physical ones, economic ones, and they come in four forms. First, drug prices. In late April 2026, Trump signed an executive order telling pharmaceutical companies, charge Americans the same price you charge other wealthy nations. Right now, the same pill costs $10 in Germany and $50 in America. The argument is simple. Why should Americans subsidize the world's drug research? Millions of people in their 50s and 60s have been asking that question for years. Second, fossil fuels. On April 20th, 2026, a series of executive orders used the Defense Production Act, a wartime manufacturing law, to directly revive coal, oil, and gas. Offshore wind projects? Canceled. Biden-era green energy tax credits? Gone. The message was clear. America is going back to what it knows. Third, shipping rules. A law called the Jones Act, which requires goods moving between U.S. ports to travel on American ships, was waived for 90 days. Why? Because tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, where 1/3 of the world's oil passes, are rising. Iran is threatening to close it. Washington needed flexibility. Fast. Fourth, DEI programs. Executive orders targeted diversity, equity, and inclusion policies at federal contractors. Any company maintaining DEI training risks losing government contracts. Thousands of businesses are scrambling to adjust. Now here's what I want you to notice. These four policies, drug pricing, fossil fuels, shipping rules, corporate culture, all point in the same direction. They're pulling power back inside America's borders, away from the global system. Economists call this protectionism, and to understand where it leads, we need to travel back 60 years to a small country that tried the exact same thing. The Samsung story. Korea, the 1960s, a desperately poor country with almost nothing. And one president, Park Chung-hee, who picked a handful of companies, shielded them from foreign competition, handed them government contracts, and let them grow. One of those companies was Samsung. Today, Samsung contributes roughly 15 to 20% of South Korea's GDP. One company, 1/5 of an entire nation's economy. Here's what's fascinating and slightly terrifying about that. When a company grows that large, it stops being just a company. It becomes part of the country's operating system. Any attempt to tax it or break it up could shake the entire economy. The government doesn't control it anymore. It negotiates with it. America has seen this before. Rockefeller in oil, Carnegie in steel. Both men built empires so powerful that Congress had to create antitrust law just to break them up. The difference? Neither Rockefeller nor Carnegie had government protection. They won anyway. What happens to our world when the elites are no longer outsiders? Imagine a modern genius not fighting the system, but being fortified by it. The trap inside the protection. In today's multipolar world, America faces a genuine dilemma. Without protection, American companies get outcompeted by foreign rivals backed by their own governments, particularly China. With protection, America risks creating new domestic empires whose financial power dwarfs entire government departments. The line between corporation and state starts to blur. Economists call this corporatism. Now look at the fossil fuel protections specifically. They're real, but time is working against them. Why? Because building a Samsung-style empire takes decades of consistent government support. South Korea backed Samsung through multiple presidents. American politics doesn't work that way. Every 4 to 8 years, the entire direction can reverse 180 degrees. A protected company today could face antitrust investigations or environmental fines tomorrow, depending on one election. So fossil fuel protectionism might produce short-term gains, new jobs, new factories, higher stock prices, without ever producing long-term strength. That's not greatness. That's a temporary sugar rush. And here's the deeper danger. If a company knows its lifeline could be cut in 4 years, what does it do? It doesn't invest in the future. It extracts value now. These protected energy companies could accumulate enough financial resources to influence the very elections that determine their survival. America doesn't just shift toward protectionism. It drifts toward state capitalism. AI is different. But now, this is where everything changes. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. Because AI doesn't need decades to grow, it scales exponentially. In January 2025, days after taking office, Trump announced Project Stargate, a $500 billion investment alliance between SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle to build AI infrastructure across America. Data centers, chips, energy systems to power those chips. This wasn't just a subsidy, it was a declaration of national priority, the way America once treated nuclear weapons during the Cold War. Then, in the final week of April 2026, the administration announced severe penalties against foreign companies, primarily Chinese, attempting to learn from or copy American AI models. The mathematical structures inside these models, called weights, are now classified as national assets, protected like military secrets. Think about what that means in practice. Companies like NVIDIA, OpenAI, Microsoft, and Anthropic are being handed something extraordinary. A government-protected monopoly over the most powerful technology in human history. And unlike a steel mill or a coal mine, these companies can embed themselves into healthcare, education, finance, and the military so deeply that no future administration would dare break them up without collapsing essential services. This is the moment worth pausing on. If AI companies become America's infrastructure, like the electrical grid once was, you can't turn them off. You have to negotiate with them, just like South Korea with Samsung. The price of autarky, a historical verdict. This model is not new. Look at Japan during the Meiji Restoration. To avoid becoming a colony, an entire nation embraced a brutal form of self-reliance. The government funneled every national resource into creating the Zaibatsu, massive conglomerates designed to be the backbone of the state. America, in 2026, stands at a similar restoration point. We call them AI alliances. We don't tax the farmer's land anymore. Instead, we mortgage the future and maintain high interest rates to protect national champion industries. Meiji's self-reliance turned Japan into a superpower, but it was paid for by generations of hardship. To build their own steel, ships, and chips, Japan erected massive trade walls. The result? Citizens paid prices for daily necessities that were far higher than the global market. Protecting corporations creates new masters of the state. History proves that when a government nurses its Zaibatsu to fight global rivals, those entities eventually grow large enough to dictate national policy. Look at South Korea. They cannot afford to let Samsung fail, even when it's wrong. America is now chaining its destiny to the survival of AI monopolies. Greatness built on debt always has a payday. In the 1980s, Japan used debt and speculation to fuel its great image. But when interest rates finally rose to fight inflation, the entire system collapsed into lost decades. America 2026. The $1 trillion annual interest payment is the breaking point. History shows no miracle can defeat the compound interest of debt. You can have the most powerful AI in the world, but if you don't solve the debt trap, that greatness is just a scenic view from the edge of a fracture. If you look deeper into the era of the Great Wars, you will see that protectionism is the ultimate tool for absolute power. During these times, governments became war boards, dictating what was made and at what price. This is total economic mobilization. Back then, citizens in Germany felt the pride of a self-reliant nation, but they were eating Ersatzbread, made from potatoes and sawdust, because wheat imports were banned. They built economic fortresses where the state and corporations became one. They achieved power, yes, but the price was decades of inflation, crushing austerity, and mountain-sized public debt. History doesn't argue with us. It only proves one thing. You can choose absolute power, or you can choose the prosperity of the people. You cannot have both. Following the money. You can't talk about greatness without talking about the price tag. To fund all of this, subsidies, tax cuts, protections, the US government is borrowing heavily. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that US national debt, already above 100% of GDP, could reach 116% to 120% by 2034. On current trajectories, it could approach 200% of GDP by mid-century. Here's a number that should stop you cold. Around 2026, America is spending nearly $1 trillion per year just on interest payments. Not paying down debt, just the interest. That figure is close to the entire defense budget, and it crowds out everything else: infrastructure, healthcare, education, because interest must be paid before anything useful can be funded. Now imagine 2028. A new administration takes over and faces a double bind. Raise interest rates to fight inflation caused by high tariffs and heavy spending, and you choke the businesses you just built up. Keep rates low to protect those businesses, and inflation rises while debt keeps expanding. There's no clean exit. That is the trap. What does this mean for ordinary life? If this all works, if America genuinely achieves energy independence, domestic manufacturing, and AI dominance, what does daily life actually look like? Let's talk about specific things: houses and cars. In the 1950s, a single-income family could own a home, 2 cars, and send children to university. Then globalization happened. Wages stopped keeping pace with asset prices. Home ownership became a 30-year financial gamble. A self-sufficient economy, if it truly functions, could change that. Housing. If domestic steel, cement, and lumber are abundant and cheap, and if building regulations ease, home prices could stabilize relative to incomes. Think post-World War II Levittown suburbs: simple, affordable, and accessible to the middle class. Simple, durable, affordable homes built at scale. Cars. If gasoline is cheap because America produces its own energy, and if domestic automakers shift toward durable vehicles rather than annual new models, a working family could own a car without 5 years of debt. Goods. An American-made shirt might cost $50 instead of $10, but if it lasts 10 years instead of 2, the math still works. This is a shift from a throwaway economy toward one built on repair and reuse. But there's a catch in this equation. For housing and cars to become genuinely affordable, America needs to solve its interest rate problem. High national debt forces the government to keep rates elevated to attract bond buyers. High rates mean expensive mortgages and car payments. The practical prosperity scenario only works if debt is brought under control, or if some special financial mechanism preferentially lowers rates for domestic workers. The new social divide. This system would also create a new kind of inequality, not the traditional rich versus poor split, but something different. Inside the ecosystem, workers in protected industries, stable jobs, good income, growing security. Outside the ecosystem, service workers, freelancers, those outside the priority supply chains, absorbing higher living costs while receiving fewer direct benefits. And here's the paradox at the center of it all. America might achieve genuine production abundance in many sectors, but abundance in quantity doesn't mean abundance in choice. Fewer product varieties, less diversity than global supply chains offered. To make American-made goods price competitive, The critical variable is automation and AI. But here's where the contradiction bites. To compete on price, you need robots and AI replacing human labor. More automation means fewer jobs. Fewer jobs means less purchasing power. And then you have a China-style problem, producing enormous quantities that not enough people can afford to buy. So, is Make America Great Again actually working? The honest answer depends entirely on how you define greatness. If greatness means self-sufficiency, this path is working. Bringing chip factories, steel production, and energy back onshore reduces dependence on strategic rivals. If greatness means technological leadership, concentrating AI development inside America while locking out competitors preserves the country's position as an intellectual superpower. If greatness means stable lives for working people, it's achievable under the right conditions. Real wages, affordable housing, durable goods. The vision is coherent. But if greatness means leading the world, that's where this path has a serious gap. When America pressures drug prices domestically, pharmaceutical companies will raise prices elsewhere or cut supply to developing nations. China steps in as the alternative, offering generic drugs and medical equipment at accessible prices. Countries across Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America will face a choice between expensive American products and accessible Chinese ones. Once they build their systems around Chinese technology, the dependency isn't just economic, it becomes political. This is exactly what Andrew Carnegie did. Not the best steel, but the cheapest steel. China is doing that at global scale. And with DeepSeek, Chinese AI can run diagnostic tools across billions of people in developing nations, giving China an unprecedented data advantage to train systems that keep getting smarter. America loses control of global health data. China gains the raw material to dominate the next generation of AI. The final question. Trump's policies aren't just repairs to an old system. They're demolition and reconstruction, building something new. Protectionism, pragmatism, and technological monopoly. If this new system consolidates before the debt crisis hits, Trump will be remembered as the man who saved America from the slow collapse of globalization. If it fractures midway, through a change in administration or a financial shock, it will leave America more divided and more exhausted than before. Adam Smith spoke of the invisible hand, the idea that when individuals pursue their own interests freely, an unseen force guides society toward shared prosperity. But in Smith's world, individuals and businesses stood on relatively equal ground. In 2026, that assumption no longer holds. We no longer operate in a truly free market. Instead, we orbit around gravitational centers, vast entities like AI supercorporations and financial alliances, so massive that they bend the very rules meant to ensure freedom. In physics, Albert Einstein showed us that everything depends on the frame of reference. Economics is no different. To governments, the right path is national power and security. To ordinary people, it is affordable living and upward mobility. To supercorporations, it is dominance, the quiet pull toward monopoly. These paths do not align. They interfere, collide, and often cancel one another out. Creation gave us the sun and the moon, not to teach us about destinations, but about cycles. Perhaps the most truthful path, then, is not certainty, but awareness. The awareness to recognize when the light is burning you, and when the darkness is consuming you. To accept that there is no absolute right path may be the only way individuals can truly protect themselves in the world ahead. Don't just listen to the political slogans. Greatness is not a free lunch. Look at the debt structure. Look at how AI companies are embedding themselves into the fabric of your daily life. Understand the rules of the game, because in a world shaped by economic genius, the people who don't understand those rules become the pawns.